how little you can get from these pictures. It's also supposed to be, and this is all from Picasso's notes, it's also supposed to remind you, the black and white, that the world is not black and white. It's black and white and gray, and all those things in between. In terms of symbolism, most of the symbols in here are standard symbols that maybe are rendered in new ways. Meaning, for instance, you take the bull over here, and the bull is a symbol of Spain on the one hand, the bullfights, running of the bulls, all those things. It's also a symbol of virility, of power. In this case, you see a bull who's showing you two sides of him, right? He's showing you this proud white head looking out at you, and he's showing you his, dark axe, literally. And even his tail looks like a stink bomb or something going on here. It's trying to tell you about the two sides of power, or the two sides of Spain. There's good and there's bad in everything. There's the rational and there's the visceral. Other symbols here, a very traditional symbol down here below of a soldier who's fallen, his arm has been cut off and his sword is broken. This is a symbol of the vanquished, the loser, right? The person who loses. He doesn't have any power anymore. His arm's been cut off, his sword is broken. This is symbolic of those who have been the fallen kind of hero. Up above, this light here is the eye of God again. The electric light, it's a little play off that Goya work that we saw earlier about the Enlightenment and technology in this case. So where does technology get us in this age? And what Picasso is pointing to is this new technology of the bomber planes and carpet bombing and another war and all the dead that are going to come. There are a ton more symbols in here, but the other thing I want to focus on is the way he renders these forms expressionistically. So, very clearly this is a woman with a dead child in her arms. And if you're wondering, why is he getting the arms or the eyes so wrong here? Well, he doesn't need to get them right. He wants to show you both eyes. He wants you to show you the full kind of expression of the face in a way. Tilting that head up this guy, mouth wide open, you can see the tongue actually wiggling as it screams at the sky. It's supposed to be expressionistic. It's supposed to get at what is the pain and agony a mother feels when her child is killed, right? Or what are the feelings you have when this is occurring? All of this death and destruction is occurring, and you're just starting to witness it. You're just starting to see it and wonder what it all means. So this figure looking out the window kind of in shock at what's happening, or this figure running into the scene, but look at how big and weird and awkward those legs are. It's like those moments in time where something big happens and time slows down for you. It just seems distended. It's that sort of thing. And I just want to show you this. His career goes all over the place. So after creating very political works of art, of course, you can go right back and create this aesthetic which leads you. Anyone have any questions about Picasso?
Just one. So he did Cubism, but he's also, that's Expressionism.
Well, it's not any ism anymore. But after the Cubist stages, everything that Picasso does is all over the place. So he has a classical kind of period, and that one's just a combination of all of the things that he's done. So there's Cubist elements to that, there's Expressionist elements to that. Picasso at that stage was also interested in surrealism that we'll be covering, but you can't lump them into one category.
Okay. So by painting the last one we looked at, was that expressionism? Since there was like all those symbols and
There's expressionistic aspects to it, but it's not expressionism. So now we're moving into something that's, it's another kind of different trend of modernism. It's not interested in the same questions at all about formalistic things or what the essence of meaning is or anything like that. It's doing totally different things. And we're looking at three movements here. One of them is futurism, one is Dada, and we're going to focus on Berlin Dada, and the other is surrealism. And these are all movements that we call in combination the historical avant-garde. The term avant-garde is actually a French military term. It means the advanced troops that go out in front of the infantry and basically soften up the other side for the infantry, so the crack troops there. And that's the same idea that they're applying to these artists. They're the ones who are at the very cutting edge. They're the ones who seem to be ahead of their time, and they're the ones who are going to have massive impacts on what comes after. The futurists, the first group, the futurists are notoriously difficult to talk about. They are a group of artists who, and by the way, all of these movements started off with poets at the lead of the movement. They are a group of artists who started in Italy, 1908, 1909. They're getting together, and they published this manifesto in 1909 in the front page of Le Figaro, which is that magazine or that newspaper that we saw Mary Cassatt's mother reading. It's kind of like the New York Times in Paris. So you can imagine an artist group publishing their manifesto on the front page of the New York Times, basically, what that might mean. And then you're going to have to listen to what this says about what they're after. And there are three major goals for futurism, all interrelated in some way. Number one, and the most simple one, is to wake up people to the fact that being tied to the past is not going to allow them to advance into the future. So just like we heard with Vasily Kandinsky, the futurists absolutely want to break down every tradition. Stop worrying about those traditions or the masterpiece or what you've learned before, and make you think about how you can see the world differently. Number two, one of the things that I want you to see of the world differently is a whole different viewpoint on how we experience the world, one that they believe was being revealed by new technologies in the world. What I'm talking about here is what we call fluxus metaphysics. Fluxus metaphysics. F-L-U-X-U-S. Fluxus metaphysics go all the way back to the Greek philosophers. People like Heraclitus are talking about these things. But at this time period, it's a philosopher by the name of Henri Bergson, who was the most prominent of these Fluxus philosophers. My best example of this is to, again, take someone who's a prominent name and show you how Henri Bergson critiqued him. This guy's Immanuel Kant, the German philosopher, who said that the way that we experience the world, or the way that we make sense of the world, is to start off with two, what he called a priori, or in advance, presuppositions or understandings that don't actually exist. And those two categories of making our existence make sense to us are time and space. So we have these big concepts of time and space, and we apply them to our world so to help us make sense of that world. They don't actually exist outside, like they're not part of the world. Our notions of time and space, they can't be confirmed by what we see around us. So, for instance, if someone says to you, I mean, we all know what we're talking about, right? When someone says, what time is it, we can point to a clock, but that clock has no bearing on the real world. It's just something we made up, a fictive amount of time to mark our existence. And the best way to prove this is to say, someone just try to conceive of time beginning or ending. What is historical time? What do we mean by billions of years? What do we mean by billions of years that the universe has been in existence? Or what do we mean by what happened before that? Where's time before that? And so forth. Or the other easy one is something like space, right? What is space? Well, we measure it in feet or meters or whatever, but where does space begin or end and so forth? So in other words, what you have here are two things that we basically make up because they're really useful. We need time and space to be able to make sense of our world, but they're kind of fiction. And what Bergson does is go along and say, well, let's just point out some of the ways that these things don't work, or some of the ways that they rather structure your experience in ways that is totally fictive. And one example of this is the way we divide time. Right? How do we usually divide time? A past, a present, and a future. We do that all the time, right? Pretty common. Well, start thinking about that for a minute. When is the past? Yeah, it's constantly, right after now, and right after now, and right after now. And how do you understand the past? Always in the now, through memory that's recalled at that moment. And the other thing is, when is the future? What's its relationship to the past? When is the present? I mean, when you start getting into these things, they get pretty messy, right? Your present is constantly being influenced by your past, and our conception of a future is constantly a virtual reality that we have to, basically pretend is going to exist, where it's a totally fictive thing. So another way to put this is we use the term past, present, future to make communication about these things easier, but really we're existing in a kind of constant continuum of time flowing, what Bergson calls durational time. The other thing is, going along with durational time, is an idea that's totally confirmed by contemporary physics, and that's that all the time, all around us, everything at a molecular level and beneath, subatomic level, is constantly in absolute motion. It's always in movement, bleeding into other things. So the things that we think are hard and stable, like this table, is actually made up of energy that's constantly in movement and constantly deteriorating and changing, even though we don't perceive it. That our bodies are made up this way. That our bodies are made up of basically the same energy that this table is made up of, and that the air is made up of that same energy too. Like, this is all the same stuff, and it's all infiltrating each other. And these things are constantly in what Bergson would call absolute motion. Everything's constantly in flux all the time at a subatomic level. We just don't perceive it, we don't pay attention to it because we've got different ways of conceiving of the world that work for us. But one of the reasons that the futurists are drawn to these ideas of fluxus metaphysics is to give you the idea that we don't need to be tied to stable identities or stable traditional values. And instead, maybe if we got rid of some of those, we would see the world anew. Right? So this gets them into the realm of how do you wake up people from this slumber, create a situation in which they perceive this fluxus metaphysics around them, and then the final goal of futurism is change the world. And it's big. They want all these historical avant-garde movements want to change the world. They want to wake everyone up to this fluxus metaphysics and have that new reality kind of